can say hi to each other. But right now, we are about to begin. Okay, so I would like to welcome everyone to the June 3rd edition of Life Writing Live, and just thank everybody for being here. It is just so much fun to see all these faces. So Tanana Reeve will be joining us in just a moment. She's taking care of a couple little tech things, but I wanted to kind of start us today, especially considering that we're in a time of stress. I just like for you to stop and breathe for 1 minute. And if you would do this once an hour, once every 1 to 3 hours, it would really help you to center yourself. The outside stress is always going to be there, but that's just life. But what we can do is we can find the eye of the storm. And there is a truth about our bodies. If our bodies behave as if they are relaxed, our minds will believe they are relaxed. If our brains act as if we're relaxed, our bodies will react as if we are relaxed. So the easiest way to do this is to control the breathing. Deep, slow, diaphragmatic belly breathing. Just breathing deep and low and slow for 60 seconds once every hour will completely reset your stress response so that it does not become strained. So as we get started here, if you would just join me just for a few breaths, just inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. Put your hands on your tummy, and when you inhale, it swells. When you exhale, contracts. Just center ourselves. Give thanks for this time of communion and sharing. I give thanks every day for the people that I love, the fact that they trust me and love me, and that I have an opportunity to reach you. Inhale and exhale. And just 2 more. Inhale and exhale. Last one. Inhale and exhale. And we are ready. So, boy, let's see. Admit. Okay. So once again, muting everybody. And welcome to Life Writing Live. Life Writing Live is an exploration of writing, art, connection between people. It's an opportunity for our community to just connect, for us to be able to say hi to each other. And we're going to be doing this, in some ways, it's every week. And here comes, this is my good lady wife.
Yes.
Tanana Reeve. I've been talking for a while. Why don't you kind of...
Well, I'm just very excited to be here, to see everyone here. Thank you for joining us. What a week. It has been an extraordinarily difficult time. We were just soldiering through the pandemic when we had to confront the legacy of racism in the United States, because there were so many police incidents happening all over the country in such a short amount of time that the whole country, and in fact the world, couldn't help but take notice. And for a lot of us, emotionally, we are right in the fray, whether or not we're protesting, because it just reminds us of so many other incidents previous to this one. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor are just the latest in a horrible string of deaths that there seemed to be no recourse for. So people are feeling hopeless and upset and angry. Now we finally have some more arrests. All of the officers have now been arrested, so that's good, but it's still, it's still a stressful time. So if you're feeling that stress and that grief, that anger, that confusion, first just acknowledge that those feelings are absolutely valid.
Yes. Do not disown your feelings. Emotions are action signals. They are saying, do something. So one of the things that we can do is be honest about the fact that we're upset. And another thing we can do is use that emotion to power our art. Now, this is true. It doesn't have to be a time of pandemic, a time of plague, a
Right.
time of racial unrest and cities burning, a time with, where we've got what seems to be a budding despot in the White House. It can just be the stress of being a parent, the stress of making our way through the world. Art is self-expression. You have to acknowledge your emotions, then use those emotions to drive your art. If you do that, you both remain a healthier human being, and your art becomes honest. It becomes valid. It becomes a way of saying to the world, I am here. So life writing is all about deepening the connection between the things we do and how we feel, the world inside us and the world outside us. So we're going to use everything that we have in order to make that more and more valid.
I had an experience this week when I woke up the morning after the civil unrest had broken out, when I was feeling this sort of sense of dread that I would have a responsibility to try to speak out and say something that would make people feel better or would give people context. And it's so big. It's like such a base, like a big Rubik's Cube. And I wasn't sure I would be up to the task, but Anthony Bresnikan, who actually was my date to the Black Panther premiere, he writes for Vanity Fair, and we do a podcast together called the Stand Podcast with Mike Flanagan and Jason Seacrest. It's called The Company of the Mad, the Stand Podcast. And he nudged me and said, listen, at Vanity Fair, they're looking for someone to write an essay. I think that these tweets you've been writing tell me that you would be great at writing this essay. And I wasn't sure I could do it. I didn't want to say yes, but I did it. And it took me longer than the day. I'm not one of those writers who can drill it out and I'm done. But I with a couple days time, and they said, take your time, I was able to write an essay called Can We Live? And I'll post a link to it on the stream page, but it came out in Vanity Fair, and I'm just really gratified that so many readers have responded to it. I was just speaking, and I'll just tell you the secret of what I did. I made it personal. Rather than trying to go at the problem from the outside in, I came at it from the inside out. When I was that 14-year-old girl having my first experience that a lot of young people are having today, just in shock to realize how unfair some of the laws are, or the way the laws are actually being applied when it comes to Black people. Just can't believe that peaceful protesters would be attacked by police, or can't believe that in such an obvious case where it was on video for 8 minutes that it would take so long to get charges, or not at all for a while. And it's just, unfortunately, this is the country we live in. And as a youngster, I learned how to attach my affection and love for my nation as an aspirational thing. Like, I love what we want to be. I love what we are striving to be. I love what most of what the Constitution sets forth for what we all, in the Pledge of Allegiance, all that stuff, and justice for all. I really believed in that. And I think we can have it. And a lot of people are working toward that right now. So writing was helpful for me. It was a difficult assignment, but I got it done.
Very good. And before we did that, we had actually been asked to do something using our fiction writing skills,
yes,
concerning another issue, the issue that began 2.5 months ago.
I remember the pandemic even. I mean, wow. Similar situation. We were still reeling from how quickly things were changing after lockdown. And an editor approached us and said, hey, will you write a story? And I wasn't sure at first. Again, I hesitated. It's like, oh, it's so big. I don't know. But we did. We wrote it. And it was Serial Box that came to us and asked us to do that.
Yeah. So we thought that we send out links to the stories, and we will send out links again after this show, so you can read the stories that we're going to talk about. What we want to do here is discuss process. To take the life writing idea is to, one, use Joseph Campbell's model of the hero's journey to speak about what the process of moving from one aspect, one position in our lives to the next.
Right.
There is, it basically, I describe it as a 10-step process. You have someone, a young man, a young woman, who is confronted with a challenge, Initially, they reject that challenge due to fear. Then they are allowed to or forced to accept the challenge. They set out along the road of trials, during which they meet allies and gain powers. They have their initial confrontation with evil, in which they are defeated. That defeat sends them into the dark night of the soul, which is the moment at which it feels that all of your capacities are insufficient to the task at hand. The way through the dark night of the soul is called the leap of faith. Now, the leap of faith is always faith in one of three things: faith in yourself, faith in your companions, or faith in a higher power. It's always one of those three things. Sometimes it's all three. If you have done the previous steps, and if you take that leap of faith, then in most stories, you will then succeed. You re-enter the fray, you succeed. And the last step is the student becomes the teacher. This is the movement to the higher level. You go on to the next journey, and hopefully what you do is you teach, you share, you take what it is that you have learned and you give it to the people of your village. So those are the steps of the hero's journey. I always use it in my own life to gain perspective, but I also use it when I'm writing stories. So it's a story pattern that I really love. There are many story patterns. There are simple things like, you have somebody who wants something stands in their way, and they have to do something to overcome it. That's the simplest story pattern I can think of that has any real use. But they're very complex.
Goal, obstacle, and
outcome.
Outcome.
Yeah, goal. Right. That's right. Objective, obstacle, outcome.
Right.
Okay, just three parts of something. That works. You can actually use that. But I like the hero's journey because you can apply it not just to your story, but you can apply it to the process of writing a story or the process of living your life. And in doing that, you learn things. So I wanted to talk about our process in terms of the stories that we did. Now, you wrote a story called Shopping Day.
Yes, I did.
Right. So, and these stories are written in like 3 days.
Yes,
so talk about your experience from the moment you got the assignment until the moment you punched the button saying send.
Well, two things helped me decide that I could do it. A, the story was supposed to be short, and B, there would be compensation. And I think I just want to make as an aside, there are some of you out there who are going to be asked to be teachers for people during this time. And that's great. People do need to be taught, but people also need to pay you for your work and your labor. So it was very important to me to be compensated for the story. And that was one of the reasons that I decided, oh, okay, I guess I can do this. So then I had to sort of really break down the essence of what fear I was feeling as a horror writer, primarily. Of course, I wanted to write something that would be suspenseful and scary. So I had to ask myself what I was most afraid of. And this is something that a lot of us don't have to really struggle with right now to think of things we're afraid of, because there's quite a lot, actually. But in my case, this was, again, the beginning of the lockdown. I was almost certain I was going to get COVID-19. I'm a hypochondriac, so I was just giving myself literally a fever with worry that I might get COVID, and wiping down everything. And the most dangerous and difficult part of my week, which I tried to extend to every 10 days or every 2 weeks, was, guess what? Going to the grocery store. So that's where...
Remember the first time you went to the grocery store after this all started, it was almost like saying goodbye to you.
It felt that way.
I know, my poor baby.
And then people don't know how to count to 6 feet, it's like all kinds of... And in the beginning, believe me, not everyone was wearing a mask. I mean, right. I was an early adapter, not as early as I should have, but with the gloves, the mask, as soon as the CDC changed the guidelines and said, oh yeah, you should wear a mask. Hello. But the hat, all of it, washing everything. So I wanted to try to capture that sense of urgency, that sense of danger, and how fragile the world felt during that time. So, as is my custom, I came up with a juvenile protagonist. Those of you who follow my work know I write quite a bit about young people. So my protagonist had a voice. She's a 16, 17-year-old. I was writing in the voice of a teenager, and her mom is going shopping. And it's, it's like one of those things where, like Steve said, it's like saying goodbye. But in the story, and the way to create escapism is not to, or at least in my view, I mean, there's a great deal to be gained from a story that captures the reality of a moment. Poems will do that with the right language, or a story that just captures the truth of our situation. That's a perfectly valid way to tell a story. I tend to want to create slightly escapist fiction. So what I wanted to do was then turn it up to 11 or 12, to use a reference from Spinal Tap, which is turn it up to 11, which if you haven't seen This is Spinal Tap, that's a great film, but that's another story.
And so is Fear of a Black Hat. They should
Yes,
be
both of
seen
them.
side by side.
Make that your escapist film festival. But how do you turn it up to like, okay, it's not our situation, it's worse. Like The Stand, frankly. I'm doing this thing with The Stand where we read 200 pages a month. The fact of the matter is, The Stand has a worse pandemic than ours. And in my story, it was a worse situation than ours. Neighborhoods had been evacuated, or most people had left. They're living in a shell of an apartment building. Now, the smoke and the tear gas part, I apparently got right. There was not smoke and tear gas at the time I wrote the story. Strangely, where the needle is moving closer to the world of my story as we go.
But witch, burn her!
But there were soldiers mentioned in the story, and people were being forcibly removed, and the children were afraid of ending up in a camp, which was an intentional reference to the children who have been held in camps when their parents tried to immigrate to the United States, which is shameful, frankly. That's a whole different conversation. Nothing happening in the streets today should surprise any of us, given that that has been our government policy to separate parents and children and to indefinitely incarcerate children or anyone really for the crime of trying to create a better life for themselves. But don't get me started. Anyway, so I wanted to create a slightly more dystopic world than the one we're in. I do emphasize slightly, but instead of trying to capture all the big broadness of how horrible the world was, again, not from the outside in, from the inside out. It's from the point of view of a child in her apartment who now feels the weight of responsibility that she has to care for her younger brother and sister, with the uncertainty that her mother might not return. Curfew, oh my gosh, it's a curfew in my story. Curfew is arriving, and she has to make a decision about what to do. And because I was writing it in the context of a pandemic, I won't give you an entire spoiler, but I will say I wanted people, when they read this story, to feel relieved and uplifted rather than beaten down and depressed, right? So I intentionally wrote my ending the way I did to create hope, because I think that's what people need right now is hope.
Very good. So tell us a little bit about your process. You know, when you write stories, you start at the beginning and you polish as you go. So when you write the end, your story is pretty much fixed. It's pretty much finished.
Yeah, that is what I try to do. For me, there's like a beacon that I try to create, like with the writing of the first paragraph. Like every sentence to me, in the creation of the world, the creation of the voice, the character, all those pieces have to fit in my mind before I can march forward, right? So I'm trying to create a mood for myself.
So you set the mood with the first paragraph
in the story, right?
Do you like read your text aloud so you can hear it, or can you, or when you read it, it already sounds in your mind? Do you go by the way it feels, it sounds, it looks? I mean, how do you?
All of that.
All of the above.
All of the above. I try to vary my sentence structure, sentence by sentence.
The rhythm of it?
The rhythms of the sentences, I often end up cutting. That's most of the editing I do is trimming out, because my philosophy is you may have a gorgeous bush there, but wouldn't it look so much better if you trimmed it so that it had a shape rather than everything sprawling everywhere? So I find those loose twigs that are like repeating what I said in the first sentence, or repeating something I said in the last page, or like repeating literally the sentence before. A lot of trimming and cutting. And one thing that I didn't have time to do with this story, but I did do with the novel I just finished, The Reformatory, was when I was racing to finish it, because
there was a time limit.
I had a chart that I had.
Oh, you're talking about the book. I'm talking about the story. We had a time limit
on the short story, so I couldn't do this. But I have found an app. Oh my gosh, I'll have to find it before the end of class.
Okay.
Which is a reader that you can upload any PDF, and you can choose from several voices, and it'll read to you. And I would write all day, And then at night, I would listen to a reader. In this case, a dude with a Southern accent, because my story was set in the South, and try to listen to it just as any other reader would experience the story. And I was doing it really, literally compulsively. So that would be a part of my process if I had time. But with this short story, it was really quick. I only really had time to let you read it. I didn't even have time to send it to anybody. Sometimes I'll send a story out to some beta readers, but we served as each other's beta readers. And I had all the usual anxieties as I was working on the story. Is it too repetitive? Is it too much like other post-apocalyptic stories that I published in my collection, Ghost Summer? Are readers tired of me leaning on teenage and child protagonists, which is my go-to? In fact, I told Steve at one point, didn't I said something like that to you, that it was my usual shtick, is how I referred to it. And is that enough? Is my usual shtick enough for this time? But in such a hurry, I didn't really know what else to do.
I think that sometimes when you have to do things under pressure, you don't have time to lie. That
Right.
what comes out is the truth. What comes out is who you really are. Well, that's great, because I loved your story.
But you, I mean, my story's right, but I mean, I'm not gonna diss my own story, but you came up with such an original science fiction concept. Mine, you could call it, I mean, not even, I don't know what you call it. The only reason
it's science fiction.
The only reason it would be science fiction is because it's slightly futuristic, but in the most vague possible way.
No, it's not that it's slightly futuristic. I would say it's set in a world of a pandemic.
Okay.
And that pandemic has changed the world. Now, there are lots of different ways one can define science fiction, but I'm fairly Octavia Butler was an inspiration for me, and a very dear friend. And science fiction is you take the sciences, which are a method of inquiry into the structure of the universe. Okay, there being two core philosophical questions: what is true, and who am I?
Right.
I was classically trained as a science fiction writer by working with two of the greatest science fiction writers of the 20th century, Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle, and they would talk about how Robert Heinlein's definition of science fiction is, what if only, if this goes on, dealing with the phenomenological universe.
And mine was definitely physics. If this goes on.
Yes.
I mean, there was a reference to a flood, but we're about to approach hurricane season now. So that's just basically icing on the cake. We're in a pandemic, and God knows what else is going to happen. My way of writing science fiction is a spoonful of science fiction helps the story go down.
Right.
So that's my approach. But yours,
now, she is a horror writer who can write science fiction and find science fiction. I'm a science fiction writer primarily who can write horror. Horror being a dominant emotion, of dread. So but that's the core thing. I started asking, well, what is the nature of the world?
Yeah.
So
what
basically,
was your process?
Okay, we'll talk about my process.
We came up with this whole anyway,
world building.
Tell them.
So basically, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, staying with a friend, and Tananarive calls me and says, "Listen, we've been invited to participate we've been invited to write a couple of short stories.
Right.
We've been invited to write a short story." And so I said, "Well, I don't know. It would have to be done within 4 days or something like this." And then the money involved was mentioned. I said,
You're like, you know what? Hold on. Let's write 2 stories.
Yeah, we've got a pandemic coming. We don't know how much money we might end up needing. This is different, Okay, so.
And I think it was smart for us to write 2 different stories.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, because collaborating is harder than writing a solo story.
Yes, it is. Each of you ends up doing about 80% of the work.
Right. So yeah.
And then there's the head butting and stuff like that.
We don't have time for that.
Literally. We don't have time for that. So my general practice when I have to write a story or I'm going to be pitching to television like this is first thing I will do, I will just take my BS filters off and I'll just come up with tons of ideas. It was using the prompt that they gave me. It's going to deal with the pandemic. It was like, let me come up with as many ideas as I can. I don't even stop and think about it until I've got at least 20 ideas. I've done 100 ideas. For pitching for television, I'll come up with 100 ideas.
Literally, he will do that.
Yeah, it'll take me about a day to come up with 100 ideas. Now, the trick is that most of these ideas are garbage. No, you didn't say that. I said that. I know. I give myself permission to just come up with inane ideas. And what happens when you do that, those filters are off. Everyone has a huge amount of creativity that they don't ordinarily tap into. I mean, everybody dreams every single night. We have, we all go nuts every night. So when you give yourself permission, it's like the part of you that comes up with the ideas is like that little kid part of you, right? Then the part of you that edits the ideas is like the adult part of you. And if you're not careful, the adult part of you will will spit on every idea that your kid comes up with before it has an opportunity to grow and thrive. So the first step is come up with a ton of ideas. So I came up with at least 20 ideas. Then I sat back and I looked at them and I thought, well, which of these ideas seem original? And so that cut a bunch of them off. I may have come up with more than 20 actually.
Wow.
But I was looking at which of these ideas look original, which of these ideas look, and I came up with it took me about an hour. Honestly. And that's what happens when you take your filters off and you're not trying to be good. You're just trying to get it out there. It's that idea. I'm going to dig through this pile of manure because I know there's a pony in there somewhere. It's so I started combining the ideas and looking at the ideas. So the filters are, is it original? Does it
very original?
Does it sound like a Steve Barnes story? In other words, does it have certain values, that there's something in there that I think, oh, that feels like me?
What would you call the primary Steve Barnes value in that story?
In that particular story, it was a particular thing where I was adapting from some study in biology that I'm doing about the difference between eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells. Prokaryotic cells, the way I remember the difference between them, prokaryotic cells are professional cells. They're like amoebas. They can live on their own. They're badass little cells. Okay. Eukaryotic cells are cells that cooperate to make more complex beings. They're like you and me, eukaryotic, prokaryotic. Okay. So the thing that's true is there are more prokaryotic cells in your body than there are eukaryotic cells. There's more of you is other stuff.
See the difference between his science fiction and his approach and mine. Mine was like, it's a little bit worse than now.
and mine is, well, what is the idea? There's something in here that has to do with the structure of life, the structure of the universe, some aspect of technology. And so I came up with the notion of weaponizing. So like it's possible to look at the bacteria in our gut as another organ in the body. It's complex enough and important enough that if it dies, we can't digest things and we'll die. That we're born, we are living in cooperation with these other beings. Now, viruses are not friendly. They don't play nice. Okay. The fact is that inside our cells, you have the mitochondria and the nucleus and all this stuff. Those things used to be separate organisms that got eaten by another organism and liked it in there and actually began to cooperate. So it's that a cooperation actually makes more and more complex animals, which also makes more and more complex societies. So the idea of small tribes being swallowed up by large tribes, individuals being swallowed up by their marriages and families, that sense of losing part of who we are. And that has a parallel to some political things where there are two different forces. In some ways, the left is about let us recombine for social good. The right is more about individual freedom. Those are the people who, they celebrate the idea of the frontiersmen and so forth and so on. Now, the fact that I'm not saying that in a pejorative sense, because you need these two forces. However, my attitude is that from 1 second after the Big Bang, the history of the universe has been one of increasing complexity and interconnectedness, that this is the same thing that's going on in our world right now.
And unfortunately, as Octavia Butler always wrote about, all those individuals, when you put them together, they sort themselves into hierarchy. And if you happen to be on the bottom of that hierarchy, then you are in trouble, which is what we're seeing right now with the issue with policing.
So there's something that I call vertical and horizontal integration. The vertical integration is the thematics of the story. And I could see how what we're dealing with here in a pandemic is people becoming isolated, society breaking down, and then using technology to create connections, so like Zoom links. But those connections do not satisfy our need to be touched. Do not satisfy our need to see the faces of people, to smell them, taste them, touch them. So there is connection and loneliness simultaneously. So
really your story is about loneliness.
Yes, that's exactly right. And once I realized that, okay, I was able to take this technological idea, apply it to an extrapolation based on what's happening during a pandemic, and then find a thematic piece that I could play with. Except loneliness. So now then, and so I put together the basics of the idea while I was in Arizona, and while I was driving home, across the desert the next day, I thought about it a little bit, but mostly I played. Uh, uh, let's see, it was radio plays. I don't think I had a book. Maybe I had a book. Oh, yeah, I guess I did. I had a book that I was listening to, but much of what I was listening to was radio plays. And I kind of separated myself from the story. I let my unconscious chew it over. I knew I could trust myself. When I got home by about 7 o'clock in the evening. And I wrote down the basics of the idea, just the basics. I wasn't going to go any further than that. That's that idea of writing at least one sentence every day. Once I crack that nut, once I take the first step there and write that stuff out, I said, well, I think this is where the story starts. You have somebody who is in this isolation, and the objective, his real objective, of course, is to be happy in life, to feel loved. That's what everybody wants all the time. So I have to set up what are the things that are stopping it. So what's stopping it is that there's been this pandemic that's gone on for an unspecified period of time, where people living in individual silos. So in other words, I started looking for the ways I could create symbols of isolation. He's locked in his apartment, he can't have people over to the house. People are having cyber sex. People are not seeing each other. He's not seeing his neighbors. But he almost accidentally finds out that his father is dying. Now, here's the other thing that in the original story, and I actually haven't read the story since I first wrote it, there was a scene where he's having a martial arts training scene with somebody virtually. Yes. I think that scene may have been taken out.
It was for space.
Yeah, it was taken. Well, not just for space. The people felt that I was repeating an image that other people had used, and so it's like, oh, okay, So I don't know that I'm in that place of I'm doing it. I haven't written a scene like this, so I don't know if somebody else has written a scene like it. I can't keep track of that, and I wasn't looking at it through the editor lens. So the next day, I wrote a script, and I write my first drafts in a piece of software called Writer Duet. Yes. And it just allows me to write a script, which enables me to go from the beginning to the end. I have character, I have dialogue, I have structure, but I'm not worried about the poetics of the language. And that enables me to race through. I can write a book in a month like that ordinarily would take me a year to just write it out as a big script. I don't worry about spelling. I don't worry about grammar. It's just get it out. Because where Tananarive goes, does a paragraph or page and then polishes it. Mine is more like developing a Polaroid.
All the way through.
Yeah, I go all the way through, and then I step back from it, and I say, well, sometimes I don't know how the story is going to end. So when I get to the end, I might have an idea that my unconscious mind might have had some idea about, but I was not consciously aware of the implications of what it was I was doing. Because while I'm doing all this, remember the structure of the hero's journey, so he's confronted with a challenge. Well, what's his challenge? To connect. Okay, on the surface, it looks like it's one thing. On another surface, it's something else. It's to connect. What's in the way? So I create all these images that are the barriers that stand in his path. And then there is the moment where everything is coming together. And he leaves his apartment and goes out into the city in order to connect with his father before his father dies. Now, the idea of the prokaryotic organism within him that is like another cell, or is another organ system, is also it has a personality of its own. They've given it personalities, and I actually had his occupation being marketing so that I could do a meta comment on how they're starting to not just weaponize these prokaryotic lumps, but they're actually naming, making them like pets, trying to get people to see them as having personalities so they can market them. Okay, so all this was tumbling out in me while I'm thinking about the original idea, while I'm driving across the desert, while I'm writing that first rough draft. So that was a long work day to create that first draft. Then I put it aside, watch television, completely forget about that. Make sure that I'm exercising and taking care of myself and take care of my family. The next day, I take that script and I transplant it from Writer Duet into Microsoft Word. Or maybe I put it into Google Docs. I guess I put it into Google Docs. And the reason I do that is that on Google Docs, I can work on it on multiple platforms. I can work on it on my desktop. I can work on it on my laptop. I can work it on my iPad. I can work it on my phone. So it's no matter where I am, if I have something to say, if I suddenly get an idea, I can drop it in. And that's a lot of what I do, is to create a situation where my creativity it's like you don't know the moment at which it stops being work and starts being play. When that point, so it's like you have to push the rock up the hill, and you don't know how high the hill is. So it's just discipline.
I just speak to that?
Please do, go for it.
Because I don't remember it as much when I was working on the story for Serial Mox, but definitely when I was working on the Vanity Fair article. For the first day I worked on it, it felt like typing. And I mean the difference between writing and typing. I'm one of those writers who loves to write. I really feel for writers who don't like writing. If I didn't like writing, I would not be a writer. So kudos to people who loathe it, but just feel compelled.
That's sad.
And they love the final product, so that's why they do it. But I've heard stories like, hey, I'm just saying. So in any case, I want to be in joy when I'm writing. And if I'm not in joy when I'm writing, it feels like I'm not writing. It feels like I'm typing sentences. I'm typing words. I can't judge how good it is, So I woke up the day after I wrote my baby draft, whatever pecking I had done on it the first day. I expected to wake up and think it was all trash, and that I would almost have to start over. And that wasn't the case, but I hadn't found the magic yet.
Yes.
I hadn't found the right opening sentence.
The right magic. Lead. Tell me about the magic, because that's what we're all looking for, is that moment in which it stops being work and starts being magic. What happens when you hit that point? How do you know you're there? In my case,
it was finding the real core of why I was writing the story and changing the lead. The lead I really, really struggled with. So I literally just went to the moment of conception, like the tweet that the guy approached me about and said, hey, you should write an essay for Vanity Fair, which was about watching social media and seeing a story about this kid named Kedron Bryant, who did a song called I Just Want to Live in the wake of the police brutality, which took me back to 14 years old. I'm sitting in my junior high school cafeteria. I write a poem called I Want to Live. And the heartbreak of realizing that all these years later, this kid was sitting where I was, right? And just to go down that line, like that straight line, I was doing lists of names of victims and history lesson. And it's now I have to wade through all that to go inside to that kid I was, and let that kid write the story, frankly. That's
not what quite the question I want to ask. Okay. How do you, when the magic kicks in, how does it feel? How do you know you're in the magic place?
Because it no longer feels like typing.
What does it feel like?
I wasn't judging every other sentence and every other word. I was just flowing with it. It was pouring out. At one point I got the tears. You're getting close to something when the tears come.
Remember, just yesterday I came to you with an idea for the script I'm working on, the book that I'm working on, and I got choked up.
You did, yeah.
At one point, I realized,
good. Okay, so then that idea is a good one because it moves you.
Yes, exactly right.
And I think and this may be helpful to a lot of you. Okay, one reason I struggled with the essay, and to a degree with the pandemic story, is that there were all these layers of protection over my skin and my emotions, because I don't want to be sobbing under my covers all day. So the way I don't sob under my covers all day is that there's a little bit of numbness that has set in. That numbness protects me, enables me to even look at social media, enables me to pull away from social media when I need to do other work and I need to cook, or to put on an audiobook when I need to escape. It's just a level of remove. I can't be as drawn into the story as if I was a personal relative of George Floyd's who's at a wake. You know what I mean? I can't live in that because it's not just him, it's also Breonna Taylor. And it's not just Breonna Taylor. Remember Ahmaud Arbery? That just happened.
Trayvon Martin.
I mean, but the downside of the numbness is that the numb part of you is not the part of you that creates. The part of you that creates is that 14-year-old kid who's sitting in the middle school cafeteria confronting her first Black Lives Matter moment, wondering, oh my gosh, we don't matter? They can just kill us and nothing happens. So I had to peel away some of the layers of the numbness to even let it in enough. And I think that's why the first day I was really still numb. And I told the editor, in fact, because, I wasn't the first person he had asked to write something. Let's just put it that way. Nobody was really jumping for it and I understood why. It's tough. It's difficult. You're in pain. It's like being in a hospital bed, being asked to write a story, which I hope to God I could do if I were in a hospital bed. But the expectation that you can write when you're literally bleeding, or not literally, but figuratively bleeding, is a lot. So I know probably some of you are in that place where you're judging yourselves because you are either in the throes of emotion or to try to protect yourself from the throes of emotion under the layers of numbness, where let's binge watch this and we started watching Columbo or whatever, just to remove yourself from it. So don't judge yourself about that. The first thing is to take care of you. The writing will always be there. But if you feel that being able to write would help you feel better, not because you wouldn't be judging yourself, but because you would actually be able to exhale a little bit more. And I felt a little exhale after I wrote the pandemic story. I felt a big exhale after I wrote the Vanity Fair story, getting something that had been squirming inside of me, an outlet to go out. Is really, really important to me. And it's the same thing that happened to me when I was 14. I started writing, and that was the first time I realized writing could save my life. Right? Because it's not just this thing I love to do. It's this thing that when I'm able to access my creativity, I can actually find relief from my feelings through the expression of those feelings in a poem, in a short story, in a short film, in animation, whatever it is. And that's what you would be striving for yourselves as writers, is to find that balance where you're not making yourself write because you feel like you should be, but yearning to write because you must.
See, for me, I look for a flow state. Okay. It's like if I'm doing Tai Chi in the morning, the first couple movements are mechanical. Then there's a point where my vision starts getting a little, not blurry, but I'm no longer observing myself. I'm no longer making my body do something.
Right.
There is this thing that is happening. I'm a part of it. The same thing is true when I'm writing a story. There's a point where it is mechanics, and it is just chop wood, carry water. I'm just doing the work. But then there's a point where the work starts doing me.
Yeah.
It's like I create the story until the story has its own vision, its own heartbeat. And that's the point. My sense is if I build it, it will come. If I do the work every day, at some point the story will begin to whisper to me. It'll start, and then its voice gets louder and louder, and then it will take me by the hand and pull me out of work into, this is a living world. I'm alive. You didn't create me. I was always there.
It's almost like you're a witness more than a creator.
That's right. That's right. It comes alive. And I think that all artists live for the moment at which the work becomes bigger than your efforts. It's alive.
It's coming through you.
You plow the ground.
Yes.
You plow the ground. You plant the seeds, but the plants are coming up because of what God does. Mm-hmm. It has its own life, its own. So there is the work that we do as artists every day, but what we're looking for is that divine spark. It's going to be in there someplace. I never know what it's going to happen. Every time I write a story, I reach a point in which it feels like it's just garbage, that there's nothing happening, that I've lost the spark. And there's always that feeling. But I've been through this process enough times that I know that feeling is there. I don't take it seriously anymore. This is just the set of feelings. Yeah. There's the work, and then all of a sudden something comes alive. And that happened in a few little sequences when I wrote it as a script. When I turned the script into a book, changing the tenses and filling it in and describing, I would notice that there were moments where things were starting to flow. But on the third day, when I polished it,
Yeah.
that was where all of a sudden it's almost like I'm working on something that was written by somebody else.
Yeah.
So like I didn't know, I don't remember saying that. I don't remember that. It's that I realized I was going in and out of flow state because I was focusing on work here. I was allowing the flow state to come in almost like a heavy syrup and just through the cracks in my consciousness.
Oh.
And the thing is happening. So, oh, the thing is, it's happening here. Yeah, it's happening. Now, all I'm doing is I'm polishing this and I'm filling in this gap. And this person would say this and this would say this. And it's all coming from a different place. And I'm having fun with it. And that little boy inside me who was, I was forcing to do his homework,
yes.
At one point is now saying, well, work time is over, Daddy. This is play. Whee! Now I'm starting to have fun. Now, and I will write scenes and I'll feel myself getting choked up, or I'll laugh, or it'll be exciting, or whatever it is. So I was able to do that on the third day. And then the fourth day, I just read it over and hit send.
Yeah, we didn't have a lot of time for editing.
No, it was basically 3 days to write a complete story. And it worked out pretty well. So you can see two very different processes. And hopefully you'll have a chance to read both stories. And this gives you hopefully some insight into all the different ways that one can address one's creativity.
Yeah,
you're smiling. It's something you want to
say. That feeling that you're talking about that you get on your last day. I'm trying to create that like from day one, like if I can. And in the store, like to me, I'm seeing a picture of like an animated character painting a closet against white space. It's just like painting this closet. And I'm going to get in this closet and close the door. And this is the thing that's real. The closet is real. I'm not going to worry about the rest of that white space as long as I have somewhere that I can feel I have created the story that is going to look like the final, like this paragraph, this page is what the rest of the story is going to look like. And I try to recreate it, like adding strokes, okay, now I'm going to paint the sofa. Now I'm going to paint the, it's just to move into the story as quickly as possible. But even within that, sometimes it feels like typing, or sometimes I find out my first page and a half was just me clearing my throat and learning about my character. And my story actually begins here after the first set of asterisks in section 2, so
now
it's not that it's perfect, but I want to try to tell myself it's perfect.
You've started collecting your essays about writing into a book, aren't you? Tell us just a little bit about what you're doing there.
Well, it dawned on me with all this pandemic downtime that I've been lecturing about writing for years, and between several different institutions and several different organizations. I taught in the MFA program at Antioch University, Los Angeles, and Santa Barbara. So I've lectured to screenwriters, I've lectured to prose writers, I've written for Medium, and I finally did compile. Steve has actually been asking me to do this for years, but I finally did compile all of those essays into about like 200 pages worth of writing advice. That I'm just calling Tananarive Dew's collected essays.
That's a perfectly good title. And my book is called Chop Wood, Carry Water. Yours is Collected Essays. And what
collected essays on writing.
Collected essays on writing. And so we're going to be making these things available on our Life Writing Premium, which is the sort of the writing community. We give as much as we can, just giving this stuff away every week or a couple times a month. But then we have another program where people are getting specific writing prompts every week. And essays and a copy of my book, and we're
Life Writing
this.
Premium, and that's what motivated me. I wanted to help Steve with Life Writing Premium more than I have been. So people who sign up,
sweetheart, you've been doing fantastic work teaching at UCLA and finishing up your book. But
people who sign up get an essay a month. So I'm breaking it up into 12 parts. So you get an essay a month, and the topics range from how to create scenes, like that's something that I noticed as an MFA instructor, that there are some students who could write on a lovely sentence by sentence basis, but they didn't understand all of the component pieces of a scene that would make it a professional level piece of writing. So now we're ready to go on to the next scene, or writing short stories, or doing adaptations, whether it's from prose to screenplays, or from a short story to a novel, or a novel down to a short story. the biggest mistakes genre writers make, although not picking on genre writers, I really, in parentheses, it says real, all writers, but some of the biggest mistakes, one being relying too much on television and film for inspiration and not literature. I think that's a uh, I think that's a little bigger issue in genre than say contemporary realism, because so many people want to write genre sometimes because they did watch a great movie or there's a TV series they really like, but in literature there are differences. So all these different topics for writers, whether they're prose writers or screenwriters, and so those will be given out for one a month.
Yep, and we're going to be doing more actually analyzing of stories, allowing we'll have what you call a story raffle, where people will be able to pitch
Lottery.
the story lottery. People will be able to pitch, stories, like short stories, to us. We'll choose one, and we'll share it with the group and allow everybody to read it, and then we will dissect it using the life writing method, on the air live, so that people can have an opportunity to see how this process works. Meanwhile, we will continue to comment on, like, we've got a Twilight Zone episode that'll be out
in a few weeks.
Yeah, in a few weeks, and we'll be analyzing that after the course, how we wrote it, the process, looking at it inside, outside. But we'll also
talk about it.
Career things.
Yes.
Yeah, we can't talk about it too much yet. But one of the things that we wanted to do is to enliven this, to make this deeper and wider. We've actually got a treat for you guys.
Well, before I get to the treat, there's one last thing I want to say about that point where you stop, or you feel like you're typing, or you lose your motivation, or your voices tell you that you're wasting your time, your story's not good enough, it'll never be good enough. Everybody confronts that. And one analogy I can think of is that Steve and I both have quarantine hobbies. Mine is making animated videos, as you're about to see. Steve's quarantine hobby has been playing piano.
Yep.
And today, a keyboard. And I just reminded him, when I was playing that game Rock Band some years ago with the family, I got really good on drums. I got all the way through the game on hard playing Rock Band. But I remember that when I first started playing the game, after I went through the first two easy songs, I was like, oh, anybody can hit like sticks together, blah, blah, blah. I came to a piece that was kicking my butt. And it made the game less fun, obviously. I couldn't go on to the next level. And a part of me wanted to kind of quit. But instead, I went to the practice room. The game had a practice room where you could go and slow down the pace, the tempo, and really learn. And that, as I told Steve somewhat facetiously, that, dear lad, is when I became a drummer. Because you cannot tell me after going through hard on Rock Band that I'm not a drummer. In my head, I'm totally a drummer. But in any case, I became a drummer in the world of the game because I understood that there would be times when there would be songs that would trip me up. And if I got tripped up, I just had to go to the practice studio and work it out, and it would be fine. And I had to learn that over and over and over. And it's the same thing with our writing. You're going to reach that point where you fall out of love with what you're writing. And sometimes it's real. It was just like a passing fancy, and it's just not there anymore. But if it's because of fear, if it's because you're frustrated, give it some space and time. Trust yourself. Do your writing session in flow state. Let your editor decide the next day or 2 days later.
If you can't get into flow state, just do the writing session. In other words, do at least one sentence every day. And you just, there's sometimes when you simply have to gut it out. There are other times when it's, running slow-mo through the daisies and you're having fun. But whatever it is that you've committed to being good at in your life, make the commitment. Define yourself as being a writer. And writers write. It's as simple as that. So it's like people ask, well, how do you have the discipline to do, writing and martial arts and so forth? Say, I don't have discipline. What I have is hunger. That I define myself as being these things, and therefore I must every day do certain things in order to be that person. And once you take the risk of actually defining yourself, one of the most powerful forces in human psychology is our need to be congruent with, consistent with our self-image. So if you see yourself as the sort of person who does certain things, those are the things you have to do. And simultaneously, if you have a goal and your self-image secretly is, well, my goal is to be a writer, my self-image is I'm a failure, I'm not really a writer, then you will struggle horribly. So it's if you just resign yourself that these are the things you're going to do, this is who you're going to be, this is who you are, and every day you're simply producing another piece of evidence for it, it changes the complexion of everything that you're doing. It simply becomes this is what we do.
Right.
This is what I do every day. I connect with my family. I do my work. I work out. I go to sleep. I wake up in the morning and do the same thing over again. That's all it is.
More and more, it is the same routine every day, which is a little scary. So try to mix it up, people. Try to mix up the routine. So do we want to go ahead and show little video?
Let's show the little video. Okay,
while he's putting it up on the screen, you can go ahead and do the screen share thing. Some of you may know that I've taken up creating little videos as a hobby over the quarantine. And I use a program called Toonly, although this isn't mostly a cartoon. This is actually mostly photographs. But this is my video where we talk about Life Writing Premium, and it's also a good way to learn about us. So you may think you know about us, but you may not know as much as you think. Oh, I hope we're not having that YouTube issue I had a while ago.
Well, let's turn it on. Let's give it a shot.
It's 1997. Yay. I'm a newly published author, and I'm invited to this amazing Black Fantastic Arts Conference with Octavia Butler, Samuel Delaney, Jewel Gomez, and Stephen Barnes. Steve was already a pioneering science fiction writer, but I'd had another introduction to his work.
We control the horizontal and the vertical.
During the 1990s reboot of The Outer Limits, Steve wrote this amazing episode called A Stitch in Time, starring Amanda Plummer. And I was like, I have got to meet this guy. I only watched that episode because a friend was already trying to set us up from a distance. And someone also told Steve about me. You really love this photo, right, honey?
Well, I loved your Stephen King story.
But a good job in the city, working for the man every night and day. And I never lost 1 minute of sleep and worrying about the way things might have been.
Tananarive talked about how she got a cover blurb from Stephen King by playing in his band, The Rock Bottom Remainders. And when I read her first book, she was just a fantastic writer.
I lived in Miami and he lived in Washington State, but we got married a year and a half later. We just knew. Of course, two married writers are always collaborating. We co-raised Nikki, Steve's daughter. We're raising our son, Jason. We also collaborated on novels with actor Blair Underwood, and we still collaborate on scripts. We're both huge Jordan Peele fans. We both met him when he came to UCLA to talk to my Black horror class, The Sunken Place, also our online class, and he invited us to Monkey Pot a pitch for his new show.
This was a real full circle moment for me. I wrote a couple of episodes of The Twilight Zone back in the 80s, but now we've written a new episode for season 2 called A Small Town, starring Eamon Wayans Jr.
We both love to write, and between us, we've written so many horror, science fiction, fantasy, thriller, books, scripts, and short stories we're so proud of. We've both taught in a traditional college setting. I still teach Black horror and Afrofuturism at UCLA, but I really believe the life writing principles should be taught at colleges.
Okay, what is life writing? It's really a method I created myself. Writing is tough. It's not just crafting stories. It's applying Joseph Campbell's model of the hero's journey to the life of the writer. And I've been teaching it for decades.
I just finished a new novel, so I know how hard writing can be no matter how long you've been doing it, but I use the life writing method to help find the joy that comes from writing too. From webinars to writing prompts, community, even some workshopping, it's all at your fingertips at www.lifewritingpremium.com.
That's my video.
Oop, oop, oop.
Sorry.
It's okay. Stop share. Okay, we're back. All right. So that's
Life Writing Premium.
That's Life Writing Premium, and that's our presentation for the day.
That's our story. I bet there was at least one thing in that video that you did not know about one of us. I bet there's one thing. So yeah, let's see. Anyway, thank you, Tom, for the comment about going to the woodshed, as the musicians call my practice room sessions. And yes, that Stephen King thing was pretty amazing. I've never put it all together in one place like that. So that was fun to make.
This is great. So someone says, Sister Nedra, there's a scientist I'd like to include in my book as a cameo and need his permission, or should I make up another name in the same field of science? I would say that unless he's a public person, that you want to get his permission. Even if he is a public person, you would like to do that. It's more polite.
And I will say this, sometimes people will surprise you. When I was working on Joplin's Ghost, I was nervous about going straight at the biographer of Scott Joplin because he's so serious and that's his life's work. But he was so fun that I actually did make him a character in the story. He appears in the novel, but with his permission. So get his permission or change the character. That would be my advice too.
So let's see. Anybody else? I'm an old Twilight Zone lover with Rod Serling. Absolutely, it was my favorite show when I was a kid. So it's an absolute work of love to have a chance to play in that universe. And we will be speaking about that again. So just keep being a part of our community, join us, and we will share everything that we know about the business, everything that we possibly can. My attitude is I want to unmute people, give them an opportunity to kind of say hello to one another. So we are unmuting. So listen, guys, speak up.
Say hi.
Hello.
Hey. Thanks for listening so long, everybody who's still here. You've been here for the whole time. It's good to see the faces.
Hi, I hope you're having a good evening.
Yeah.
Hi. I'm from the East Coast, so I was a little sleepy. I'm sorry about that. But I join in on Saturdays with Octavia Tribe. So this is my first time here. Yeah.
Okay, well, welcome to this too. I do a lot of different outreach videos to the writing community. So I do Octavia Tribe with Monica Coleman, and Steve and I have been doing life writing and other courses for years. So hopefully we'll see a lot more of you.
Yeah. So listen, we just thank you for joining us for the last hour. We will be doing this more regularly, so we don't need to drag out your evening. Some of you are on East Coast time. So I just wanted to say thank you very, very much for being a part. If you have questions, comments, or requests about anything, questions you'd like us to address, issues that you'd like us to focus on, please let us know. We're very, very open to that. We're trying to build a community of writers who are expressing their lives, expressing their truth.
Just look for our life writing page on Facebook. You'll see our faces, and that is absolutely free to join.
Absolutely. So thank you very, very much. And let's see what we're gonna. Anything else you want to say?
Everyone have a good night. If you feel like you can and you must, then write. If you need a rest, then rest.
Okay. Take care, everyone. Love you guys. Thank you for being here, and we will see you again later.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.